We have lots to talk about here in today's video, including lots around the Toronto Maple Leafs. Lots of Toronto media speculating after last night's embarrassing loss to the Florida Panthers about the future of Mitch Marner. Does he want to get a fresh start somewhere else next season? How about the future of President Brendan Shanahan? What the future of Max Domi? Lots of speculation about moving parts and what could happen if the Leafs don't come back and win this series. Plus, we have some updates around the Ottawa Senators. They made some announcements today regarding their front office. Some new additions to the staff. Plus, we have some speculation around free agency and trades that they may be working on as well. Of course, last night we saw the Edmonton Oilers punch their ticket to the Western Conference Final as well. All that and some other coaching and executive updates from the vacancies around the league coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have lots to talk about here today. Certainly going to have a heavy focus here on the Leafs. The loss last night against the Panthers has really dominated the media landscape here today, and we'll get into some of that here a little bit later. But first, I want to talk about another game that went a little bit better for a Canadian team last night, and that was the Edmonton Oilers defeating the Vegas Golden Knights in Game 5 in overtime to pull off a 1-0 victory in the game, a 4-1 series win to close out the second round series and punch their ticket to the Western Conference Final for the third time in 4 seasons. Of course, that means that Stuart Skinner, for the second straight game after a not so good first game in his return after Calvin Pickard got hurt, second straight shutout for him. He certainly quieted a lot of his people that were counting him out and saying he couldn't get the job done. I'll admit I was very skeptical about Skinner. I wasn't sure the Oilers could get it done with him. And I think he took a lot of fair criticism, but I think like for a lot of us who were critical of his play, which I think was completely justified, I think he's kind of proven that there's two sides to Skinner, and the good side is really shown here over the past couple of days. And he certainly proved us wrong. Back-to-back shutouts. It's been a while since Skinner gave up a goal. The Oilers got an unlikely hero in Kasperi Kapanen, getting the overtime winner last night. Was playing on a line with Leon Draisaitl, get a great opportunity, and he took advantage of it. That was a hard-working goal, too, as well. But the Oilers prove that they can play in different types of ways. Last night was more of a lower event hockey. Both teams being a little bit more cautious, a little bit more defensive minded. Goaltenders were both playing well, and they were able to pull it off. Not like the high scoring, a high octane offense that you normally see out of Edmonton. So obviously a huge win for them to get one step closer to getting back to the final where they were last year. Of course, they'll have to go through the winner of the Dallas-Winnipeg series, which currently has Game 5 going tonight, which is Dallas versus Winnipeg in Winnipeg, with the Stars with a 3-1 series lead. We'll see if the Jets can remain alive in that game. The Washington Capitals also trying to do the same tonight against the Carolina Hurricanes. That game is ongoing here in the first intermission as I record this video. It's 1-1 after 1, and the Hurricanes have their top prospect, Alexander Nikishin, making his NHL debut tonight in place of Jalen Chatfield. So obviously a big moment for him. Obviously the Canes trying to close things out, and the Capitals, who were the top team in the Eastern Conference, trying to hang on. As we see, the regular season standings don't always play a huge role in playoff results. Looking at Washington and Winnipeg, each conference's top team on the ropes here, down 3-1 in the second round. So we'll see what can happen for either of those teams, if they can extend it to Game 6 or if they're going to be done this evening. We'll report back, of course, a little bit later and see what happened in the next video. Of course, we also got updates today from a few NHL teams that are going to be going into their Centennial season. I wonder if we're going to see some, special jerseys or whatnot, but obviously some of the original 6 teams, Chicago, Detroit, and the New York Rangers, are entering their 100th NHL season. So certainly a big moment for them. It's a ton of history, as we know. Obviously, at this point, none of those teams were in the playoffs this year. Detroit's been rebuilding for a while. Chicago's been rebuilding the last few years. The Rangers miss after some better seasons here in the last couple of years. But I imagine we're going to see lots of celebrations over the course of the next year. A few updates when it comes to coaching as well. In Philadelphia, we know they announced and confirmed new head coach Rick Tocchet here already. We did get confirmation today that Brad Shaw, of course, who took over from John Tortorella as the interim head coach and had been an assistant under Torts, was not going to be returning to the Flyers organization, so he will not be part of Tocchet's staff in any capacity. I'm sure he'll likely have opportunities to catch on somewheres, probably as an assistant, which is what he has most experience with. In Los Angeles, of course, they introduced Ken Holland to the media today, and he did confirm the head coach Jim Hiller would be back. So no changes coming there in Los Angeles. We kind of figured that was going to be the case, but until they got the GM figured out and how had it announced and confirmed, it was hard to say for certain. But Holland's confirmed that Jim Hiller will return. Of course, we know that some of his staff, especially DJ Smith, is interviewing for other head coaching vacancies around the NHL. So his staff may or may not be changed or different based on if any of them gain employment elsewhere. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. A bunch of updates around the Ottawa Senators, and then we'll get into the Leaf stuff here. The Ottawa Senators today made a number of announcements. One, announcing that they have Matt Turek as part of the organization as well. Now, of course, Matt Turek's the former general manager in the OHL for the Hamilton / Brantford Bulldogs. Of course, that team was recently sold, but was under ownership of Michael Landauer, the owner of the Ottawa Senators. So he gets a different title. Normally, you go in and teams have like an assistant general manager be the GM of the farm club in the American Hockey League. And that's not his title, though. His title is the general manager for the Belleville Senators. So it's basically the same thing. But I guess sometimes those AGMs have other duties and responsibilities mixed in with that. That's not going to be the case with Matt Turek. He will be with the organization and be solely responsible for looking after things in Belleville. So obviously, like I said, he's got previous experience with Andlauer. Staios will be familiar from their time in the OHL. So again, not a huge surprise. They're bringing in a familiar name, familiar face, and somebody who's been around the game quite a while. And another surprise announcement is they've hired former NHLer who announced his retirement today, Sam Gagner, has been named the director of player development. Of course, Sam Gagner, who appeared in over 1,043 NHL games today, announced that he's hanging up his skates and announced his retirement. He spent part of this season playing in the Ottawa Senators organization with the Belleville American Hockey League team. He went down there on, I think it was like a 20-game tryout or something like that. Now that he's been named the director of player development, you kind of wonder if this might have been in the works for an extended time. Was he down there kind of investigating, getting to know a lot of these younger players with the possibility of taking on a role like this? I mean, it wouldn't be shocking. We found out that was the case. But yeah, Sam Gagner's playing days are now coming to an end here at age 35, and he is the director of player development now for the Ottawa Senators. It's expected that they're going to announce a new assistant or associate, depending on what title they want to give them, general manager to work with Steve Staios. Of course, was Ryan Bonus previously, who's going to be confirmed to not be returning to the organization. And it's not just because they hired Matt Turek. I do believe they're going to have somebody else with that official title, and it's most likely going to be Rob DeMaio, who came over, again, somebody else who's familiar with Staios and Andlauer and had joined the organization previously. Will most likely be promoted to that role here in the near future. Some other tidbits when it comes to the Ottawa Senators as well. Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun and TSN is reporting that contract negotiations have begun with pending unrestricted free agent and veteran Claude Giroux. Giroux is expected to most likely return to the Ottawa Senators. Of course, he signed there. Many argue he was the greatest unrestricted free agent signing the team has ever made in its history. Of course, the Senators are a team that he calls home, being from the Ottawa area, and of course has a young family, wife and kids. You know, everybody's pretty comfortable there after a long career at the Philadelphia Flyers, and then of course after being traded to the from Philadelphia, to Florida, I went to Ottawa as a UFA on a 3-year deal, which is now expired, or will be come July 1st. Expectations are that he wants to remain with the Senators, and the Senators want him back based on comments from GM Steve Stais. The belief is that he very well could sign a 1-year deal. Of course, Drew, into his later 30s now, could do a 1-year deal where he takes a lower salary but can earn more money via performance bonuses. So it's expected that his salary right now, which was on the last contract was $6.5 million, is probably going to drop down to about $3 or $4 million. But he could have some bonuses built in that could be around games played. It could be around whether or not the team makes the playoffs. It could be whether or not certain other things are achieved, where he might be able to earn, another $1.5 million or something like that. So you can work in other bonuses that way that he can earn extra funds. So that way he can technically have an option to make more money, but it's not all going to count on this year's cap, for one. And secondly, he's earning more of it through certain achievements. It's not just straight salary in case things don't go as well. So typically now what happens when those bonuses, like I said, it's not all on 1 year's salary or on 1 year's cap, but what can happen at the end of the year if they have the cap space to absorb anything he earned, then it'll count and be captured for the upcoming 25-26 season. But if that is not the case, and let's say they're maxed out their cap space and he earns bonuses, then there'll be a little bit of a penalty for the following season, which they wouldn't really be too worried about because the cap's supposed to be going up quite a bit. So the Sens are working on negotiations with Giroux. Like I said, the expectations, according to Garriock, from people he's talked to around the league, that he's probably going to do a 1-year deal. It could be 2, but most likely 1, somewhere in that $3 to $4 million range, and it could have bonuses built in to allow him to make a little bit more. The other thing around the Ottawa Senators is that there was reports today from Dave Pagnotta of the fourthperiod.com suggesting that the Sens definitely are interested in adding another scoring winger into the mix. Obviously, they want to sign Giroux. They recently acquired Fabian Zetterlund, also as a pending restricted free agent, who they do see taking a bigger role with the club next year and should be able to score at a higher clip than he did in the short stretch here after the deadline. But he wasn't he's bouncing around the lineup a lot. They already had set lines. It wasn't quite, it took time to ease him in, but he definitely has a lot of potential. I think that was pretty clear for sure. But besides him, they do want to add a little bit more depth, a little bit more scoring. So expect them, but some of the, of course, depending on who makes it there. But right now, things are projecting like guys like Nick Ehlers out of Winnipeg or Brock Besser out of Vancouver are going to be some of the top wingers that have, a history of being a good goal scorer available in unrestricted free agency. Doesn't mean the Senators are going to be able to land either one, but they're definitely expected to be in the mix and trying to get a player like that to add to their lineup. So we'll see what they can come up with. And of course, if they can't find a player they're quite happy with to fill that need through free agency, then they could look to the trade market. But all in all, free agency, of course, is a little bit easier where you don't have to give up a bunch of assets. Now, as I mentioned, the Maple Leafs. The meltdown has begun in Leaf land. Of course, I'm sure if you're a Leaf fan, I'm sure you're not feeling too good today. I feel like you've watched a movie that you have on repeat and you've seen this before and you were hoping for a different ending, but it didn't happen last night. Of course, we talked in last night's video about the poor performance, the embarrassing loss. I know the fans are frustrated. And deservingly so. It's been 9 years of this. And, in the first couple of years, you can kind of let them off the hook. They're gaining experience and all that. But, we're so far into this core fours time in Toronto that there's no more excuse. It's just that simple. That last night was probably the biggest game in Maple Leafs recent history, and for probably since 1993, when they were that close to going to the Stanley Cup final and when they were in the conference final against the Los Angeles Kings and Wayne Gretzky. And it almost became a Toronto-Montreal Stanley Cup final. But that's probably was their biggest game since that point. If you look at the last 20 years, and if you look at the last 9 years, especially with this group of players, with the core group being, between Nylander, Marner, Matthews, Tavares, they have one series win before this year. They got the second series win in round 1 this year against Ottawa, but they've never made it out of round 2. They had a 2-game lead in the series. They've now lost the last 3 to be down and facing elimination for the first time in the 25 Stanley Cup playoffs. It's taken a major turn and fast. So a lot of updates came today. I know James Myrtle, who's one of the Leaf writers for The Athletic and obviously a well-connected source here for a lot of inside info. One thing that he said was, because he was on the podcast or the Muriel was interviewed with one of the Leaf shows with JD Bunkist, and some interesting things that he had to say. At least I thought this was mostly his gut feelings. It wasn't necessarily all around intel or inside info, but I think he makes some valid points there. He says, for example, after the way the season has gone and the way the playoffs have gone, he doesn't think they really want to bring back Max Domi. I know Max did have a big overtime winner earlier against Ottawa, but generally speaking, it's been a frustrating year for Domi overall. Last night was a especially frustrating night for Max Domi, taking some bad penalties. And overall, I think the first season he was with Toronto worked out pretty good. Got the contract extension, and then I think they've kind of had some buyer's remorse, so to speak. There are aspects of Max's game that they like, obviously. And, with the history of his dad being a former Leaf and all that, I think they like the nostalgia. They think they like what he can bring, the grittiness and all that. But there are times when you need more. And, there's certainly a possibility that, depending on how things go here, I know we're already feel like we're kind of writing the obituary for the team, and they're not dead yet. They still have life. Game 6 has not happened yet. I know, based on what we saw in Game 5 and what we've seen the last 3 games, it's hard to imagine that they're going to go down and force Game 7 and go back home and win it. But it ain't over. Until they actually lose that 4th game, they're not out. I think a lot of people right now are feeling like I said, that the Matthews and Marner, especially after how they played last night, they don't have it in them. They can't get over the hump. It's hard to imagine that they can. A lot of people are writing them off. And this would be a prime opportunity for them to kind of be like, you know what? Let's shut everybody up and let's get it done. But it's just hard to imagine where they can find that dig down deep and just go out and do it. They've been waiting for 9 years to see this. It's hard to imagine it's suddenly going to show up, in Game 6 in Florida tomorrow. But hey, time will tell. Myrtle was also talking about obviously the pending free agency of Mitch Marner and saying how, based on how this series has gone, that it seems like there's probably a pretty good chance Marner's not coming back. Now, you listen to a lot of other Leaf voices in the media here, looking like the Nick Kyprios and Justin Bourne show. Like, they were saying essentially, like, to lose a series, you can't bring Marner back. And then Chris Johnston, of course, who writes for The Athletic and part of TSN's Insiders, he said there's a growing sense around Marner that he would like to have a fresh start somewhere else this offseason. So, obviously playing in Toronto, it's his hometown, but it's a ton of pressure. And it sure seems like, from what we're hearing, that there's a pretty good chance that Marner may not be back next year. This might be it. I know he was asked by one of the reporters after the game last night if he'd given any thought about the fact that it could be his last home game as a Leaf, and he said no. But the big thing, too, that you don't get with Marner, and I think for this reason is what frustrates a lot of people, and to be honest, I think what could kind of help of what's kind of running him out of town, so to speak, but you don't hear him ever take accountability. That's the big difference between Marner and a lot of his teammates. Listen to the guys who spoke to the media last night. He said Chris Tanev. Chris Tanev has not been somebody who's played poorly. He has been a defensive strong suit on that back end. He's as tough as they come. He eats pucks like it's nobody's business, blocking shots. He's taking a pounding from the Florida forwards. Is he one of the players that you think has been bad or really needs to be better? No, probably not. You're not pointing a whole lot of the blame or fingers at Chris Tanev, but when he speaks to the media, he talks about how the team had a bad game. They need to be better. And what does he say? I need to take accountability. I need to be better. Like, I'm not really sure you need to be a whole lot better, Chris, but I appreciate the sentiment. You hear William Nylander was asked about the fans leaving and booing. They're leaving early and booing and throwing jerseys and all that. He said he understands. I understand what they're going through. We let them down. Listen to Austin. Even Matthews said, when he was asked that same question about the fans leaving and booing, he's like, well, we didn't really give them anything to cheer about. But they also made comments about how they need to reset. They need to be better. When Mitch was asked about the fans booing and leaving early, all he said was that he doesn't really focus on that stuff. I would just like to hear Marner take more accountability. To me, that's, I think, the one part of being a hometown kid that I'm not really sure that he really gets. To me, I get the feeling that He wants the results, he wants the accolades, but doesn't want to do all the tough work to get there. What we're seeing from Marner, and I think Matthews is certainly, at least to some degree, guilty of this as well, that you're not seeing it at other top stars. Other top stars elevate their game. They come to play. They can adjust to playoff hockey, and these guys have not been able to do that. So, in all honesty, Brendan Shanahan's contract is up. We know that for him to stick around, he's going to need a new deal. If they lose this series, does it make any sense to bring him back? I mean, to be honest, I think Shanahan needs to shoulder the most blame. Shanahan is the one who doubled down and kept, doubled down, tripled down, quadrupled down on this group of core guys that they've never broken up. Most teams are not going to be that patient for 7, 8, 9 years and run it back. We're going to give them everything they want, and we're not going to trade them. Like, we're just going to keep coming back. We'll change the coach every few years, and the bottom six, are going to have some rotations, and then we're just going to hope the changes. That's not how it goes. Your top guys set the tone, and they either have that or they don't. And these guys have yet to be able to demonstrate that they do. That's where I think things are at. So do I think Shanahan needs to go? Yes. I think, on all honesty, I think that was a big part of why Kyle Dubas is not back. I think Dubas was ready to say, we're done with the core four. We need to trade at least one of them. We need to shake things up and go with a different approach, different look here. And I think he was basically said, no, we're not doing that. So never mind, you're out. Because I know that Dubas needed a new contract. They were negotiating and wasn't going great. But I think a lot of it was around the direction of the team. And I don't think they're going to come out and publicly say that. But to me, that's what I think. I think Dubas was ready. Because listening to how he spoke to the media, which is unusual. You don't usually see a lame duck GM or coach speak to the media at the end of the season if they're not expected to be back. So I think everybody expected that he was going to get a new contract and remain with the team, and that he was going to want to make changes. And I think those changes he wanted to make was basically told, you can't. We're not doing it. So I'm going to get rid of you, and I'm going to bring in somebody else who I know won't do it. But now they're at a predicament where they should have made a trade a long time ago, and now they're screwed. And now they're in a situation where if they lose this series, you really can't turn around and give Mitch Marner $13.5, $14 million after this performance. But if you don't, then now you lose them for nothing. It's such a screwed up situation at the end of the day. It really is. So it sure sounds like if the Leafs don't find a miracle comeback in this series, and I think beating the Panthers in 2 consecutive games after what we've seen in the past 3 is going to be a very tall task. I'm not sure that they're up to it, but like I said, they're not dead yet. They have to try, and if they can miraculously get this job done, then they'll change the narrative around their legacies, their futures in this team, and it could be a completely different story in a few days' time. But for right now, the story who still has one more chapter left in it for right now that's not quite finished, it's not looking good. And if the story ending isn't miraculously changed, you're going to see Shanahan gone, you're probably going to see Marner gone, and you're probably going to see Domi gone by what Myrtle's saying here as well. And there could be more changes as well. I mean, they've already kind of remade a lot of the decor. They've got some pretty good depth in goal. It's really the forward group at the high end of things, to me, is where they need to consider some changes. Obviously, if you can't bring Marner back, you try to trade maybe his signing rights to get something. I don't know. It's complicated for sure. The other thing that Myrtle said as well is that once the season does come to a close, that we're going to probably hear some more about Anthony Stolarz. And he said that from what he's hearing, that what he's going through seems to be pretty significant. So again, the team hasn't confirmed that. That's just kind of his, assumptions based on what he's seen and heard himself around the team. But yeah, Berube was asked, is Stolarz going to go with you guys for Game 6 in Florida? And he said he doubts it. So, even though he's been on the ice, I think he's a ways away from being able to play, and it looks like a pretty serious situation. But this is a pretty big deal. The Leafs, I don't know, they could dominate the storylines of the offseason here by, not getting through this series and kind of screwing things up. But it's not just that they lost last night. It's how they lost and how embarrassing that was, and the lack of showing up from Marner and Matthews that just... it's frustrated everybody to no end. They don't seem to have that ability to get over the hump. They can't handle it when the tough gets going. When you get these tough matchups against other high-end skill and high-end talent that are elevating their game, they can't take it to another level. At least they haven't been able to so far. So are they going to change the story? Are they going to take the pen and rewrite the last paragraph in their legacy of this core four and their story here? Or is it going to end in Game 6 in Florida, and we're going to see significant change? Follow that up here in the coming weeks of the offseason. Let me know your thoughts on all of that in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.